Today we are taking up Shakespeare's sonnet number 73, That Time of Year. You have the text of the poem given here and the same text in the modern version. About the poem, first I'd like to tell you that sonnet number 73 was written by the English poet and playwright William Shakespeare. Though it was likely written in the 1590s, it was not published until 1609. Like many of Shakespeare's first 126 sonnets, it is a love poem that is usually understood to address a young man. We all know that WH stands for that young man. The poem uses natural metaphors of decline and decay to deal with the onset of old age and suggests that the inevitability of death makes love stronger during the lover's lifetime. Like Shakespeare's other sonnets, it departs from the earlier Italian sonnet structure and rhyme scheme and follows the Shakespearean sonnet form, which is ABAB, 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 CC. Now, sonnets number 71 to 74 are typically analyzed as a group linked by the poet's thoughts of his own mortality. However, sonnet 73 contains many of the themes common throughout the entire body of sonnets, including the ravages of time on one's physical well-being and the mental anguish associated with moving further from youth and closer to death. Time's destructive effect on great monuments is juxtaposed with the effects of age on human beings, and it is a convention which is seen before in Shakespeare's sonnets, most notably in sonnet number 55. About sonnet 73, we must note that it is one of the most famous works of Shakespeare, but it has prompted both tremendous praise and sharp criticism also. Included here is an excerpt from Shakespearean scholars John Berryman and John Crowe Ransom, who commented that the fundamental emotion in sonnet 73 is self-pity, not an attractive emotion. What renders it pathetic in the good instead of the bad sense is the sinister diminution of the time concept quatrain by quatrain. We have first a year and the final season of it, then only a day and the stretch of it, then just a fire built for part of the day and the final minutes of it, then entirely deprived of life in prospect, and even now a merely objective that, like a third person, is a corpse. Now, taking up the poem quatrain by quatrain, first quatrain. That time of year thou mayest in me behold, when yellow leaves or none or few do hang upon those boughs which shake against the cold, bare ruined choirs where late the sweet birds sang. Now, in the first quatrain, we see a metaphor has been employed of winter day, which emphasizes the harshness and emptiness of old age with its boughs shaking against the cold. Now, always remember that cold also has associations with old age. We say old people feel more cold because the warmth goes away with the increase in age. He tells the beloved that his age is like a time of year. He connects it to autumn, late autumn, when the leaves have almost completely fallen from the trees and the weather has grown cold and the birds have left their branches. It's bare, ruined choirs, bereft of bird song. So the birds are not there, the leaves are not there on the branches, and there is a suggestion of an end coming close. Now, if we see the second quatrain, in me thou seest the twilight of such day. Now, what is twilight? Twilight is when the sun goes down, the little light that is just left before it becomes completely dark. That is twilight. In me thou seest the twilight of such day, as after sunset fadeth in the west, which by and by black night doth take away, death's second self that seals up all in rest. Quatrain 2 makes life still shorter, going from the seasons of the year to the hours of the day. See the transition. The first quatrain talked about autumn season. It's cold also. Winter has not absolutely gone. Autumn is there and the leaves are dropping. The birds are all gone. Nothing is pleasant. Everything, it's the end of the year. The seasons of the year to the hours of the day. Now look, now he's talking about second quatrain to the hours of the day. It's reducing from A season is coming to a day. The narrator is at the twilight of his life. His sun has set, and death is soon upon him. That is what he tries to say. As after sunset fadeth in the west, when the sun goes down, which by and by black night doth take away. And then what happens? After sunset, night comes. Death's second self. Night is the second self of death, because just like death ends everything, so also night ends the day. That seals up all in rest. What happens? Night brings rest to all the human beings who have been toiling throughout the day. It's the end of the day. So also death is the end of life. So in the second quatrain, he says that his age is like late twilight, as after sunset fadeth in the west, and the remaining light is slowly extinguished in the darkness, which the speaker likens to death's second self, as I explained. In the second quatrain, the metaphor shifts to that of twilight. In the first quatrain, the metaphor was what? Of autumn season, and emphasizes not the chill of old age, but rather the gradual fading of the light of youth. His youth is slowly going away, as black night taketh away the light by and by. So black night comes and it takes away the light of the twilight. That also goes away. But in each of these quatrains, with each of these metaphors, the speaker fails to confront the full scope of his problem. Now we see the seasons are cyclical. If autumn has come, it's going to go away also. After autumn, the other seasons are also going to come. If night has come, day again is going to come. It's cyclical. It will keep on moving. So the speaker fails to confront the full scope of his problem. Winter follows spring, spring will follow winter just as surely, and after the twilight fades, dawn will come again. In human life, however, the fading of warmth and light is not cyclical. Youth will not come again for the speaker. Once it's gone forever. Coming to the third quatrain, in me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie, as the deathbed whereon it must expire, consumed with that which it was nourished by. The emptiness of death is not fully established until this quatrain, where it is finally understood by the narrator as something permanent. Whereas the changing of the seasons and the passing of day and night occur in infinite cycles, as we saw in the previous two quatrains, a fire is not reborn, remember, from its ashes, and its extinguishment means the end. It will never be able to restore itself to the previous condition, become wood again, the ashes will turn to wood again, a fire will be lighted. No, it does not happen. It's a reaction, that's a chemical reaction, it does not take place again. Time is the enemy, time is death. The passing of time is the creator and the destroyer of life. It's going to end everything. The speaker compares himself to the glowing remnants of a fire which lies on the ashes of his youth, as he says. Ashes of his youth meaning his youth has ended. That is, on the ashes of the logs that once enabled it to burn, and which will soon be consumed by that which it was nourished by. How were the ashes formed? How was the fire burning? It was burning because of the wood that was put into the fire. That is, it will be extinguished as it sinks into the ashes which its own burning created. The ashes was created by the burning of the wood. It will never be restored to that previous state. He must resign himself to this fact. The speaker makes clear the nature of his leaving ere long. We understand that when he talks about leaving ere long, in the couplet, the final couplet, we understand what he is talking about. He is talking about his death, which would happen eventually. So, in me thou seest the glowing of such fire, that on the ashes of his youth doth lie. So, he is in such a condition that he is lying on the ashes of his own youth, as the deathbed whereon it must expire. He is talking about the ashes on which the wood die, consumed with that which it was nourished by. So, finally, the end, the ashes, is what is the result of the wood's burning, and will never be restored to the previous state. The final couplet, this thou perceivest, which makes thy love more strong. He says, you know this, you see this, and this makes your love more strong for me, to love that well which thou must leave ere long. You must always remember that since the time is short, the time which he has with the poet is short, his friend must love him all the more in all that small time frame they have together, which thou must leave ere long means before long. Before long, he knows that he will have to leave his dear friend and go. So, that time interval which they have together must be utilized properly. With that said, the closing couplet of Sonnet 73 is like an admonition almost. One's love should grow stronger as one's time left to love is running out. It is not entirely clear whether this line is addressed specifically to the fair lord or in fact to himself, or perhaps even to both, since the narrator's approaching death will mean that each must bid the other farewell. In any case, the narrator is clearly distressed by his inevitable fate. Old age, death, eternal separation from the fair lord. He does not seem to be in very high spirits as he writes this couplet. In the couplet, the speaker tells the young man that he must perceive these things and that his love must be strengthened by the knowledge that he will soon be parted from the speaker when the speaker, like the fire, is extinguished by time. The couplet of this sonnet renews the speaker's plea for the young man's love, urging him to love well that which he must leave soon. It is important to note that the couplet could not have been spoken after the first two quatrains. Now, if you go back to the first two quatrains and if you think of the couplet being put up there, you can see how misfit it would be. Why? Because these two talk about cyclical things. The first couplet talked about seasons which keep on coming. The second couplet talked about the day and the night and the twilight. These keep on coming, cyclical. But the third quatrain, that's the one that talks about the fire and the wood and the ashes. So the couplet being placed after the third quatrain is so well put in there. No one loves twilight because it will soon be night. Instead, they look forward to morning. It does not end the hope of people when you look at the twilight. So the couplet is perfectly placed where it is. Now, if you look at the use of imagery in the poem, the imagery begins and continues as visual. If you see para number 1, you find yellow, sunset, glowing, and one by one these are destroyed. Everything seems to be getting destroyed there. The yellow leaves, the sunset, the glowing, everything keeps on getting destroyed. But also in the first quatrain, one heard sounds of birds singing, that is auditory imagery, which disappears again. And from the couplet, imagery of every kind is excluded, and when you look at the couplet, the two lines, you will find there is no imagery, as if the sense were indeed dead and only abstract posthumous statement is possible. Sonnet 73. Now, if you look at the theme, Sonnet 73 takes up one of the most pressing issues of the first 126 sonnets, the speaker's anxieties regarding what he perceives to be his advanced age, and develops the theme through a sequence of metaphors, each implying something different. Now, if you have any questions based on this sonnet number 73, you may put it in the segment below and I will explain it to the best of my ability. Thank you.